Hello, Thrive Tribe. Welcome back to Survive to Thrive Warrior Voices. Today we have a trauma survivor ambassador with us. Her name is Deb, and she has experienced multiple different traumas in her life. But she is here to talk a little bit about the trauma, but a whole lot about how she went from living through so much deep trauma to live in this wonderful, happy life that she is living today. So please join me in welcoming Deb. Thank you, Deb, for joining me today on this podcast. We're so excited to have you.
Hi, Jamie. Thank you. It's an honor.
No, gosh, no, it's my honor to have you. It is so rare to find trauma survivors like yourself that are willing to share their story for the good, to share their story to make other survivors feel less alone. And and I just can't thank you enough. I've done a lot of work with like Haven and different organizations that work with trauma survivors, and they all say the same thing that it's really hard to get survivors to share their story. And so thank you for helping me on this mission of getting us all talking and talking about ways that we can get through our trauma and not let it affect us or control us through fear or anything else for the rest of our lives. So tell me, what motivated you to become a trauma survivor ambassador?
First of all, I am really honored to do this. This has been a long time coming, so to speak. So like I said, I told you before, I've had a lot of trauma in my life. Being an adult and having children and other circumstances in my life as an adult has really pushed me to want to say my truth is what I always say. Um, and meeting a lot of women in our Jeep Club that have gone through the same experiences, and I can relate to them and talk with them, and we help each other so much. And seeing that there are other people out there that need that person to talk to or that person to relate to is huge. It's a huge inspiration for me to do this.
Well, I love that. And I love the fact that you found a safe space through the Jeep group and found some safe people that you
Yeah,
could relate to and share your story. And what I have found, and you can tell me if this is your experience or not, but when you do start talking about your trauma, and surviving it and then thriving through it, it's healing. Do you experience
absolutely.
it? Like every time you talk
Right.
about it, it just builds this power in you.
It does.
And yeah, so I love that you have that. I love that you have found friends that can let you own your truth and support you through that. So let's start off talking about like what was life like before trauma and then just kind of walk us through the different types of trauma that you have been through.
Sure. So I had a pretty normal childhood. I grew up in a big family, lots of kids on our street, was always out hanging out with everybody every day, the normal childhood experiences, going out to play outside. We weren't always like this. We didn't have that at that time. So, yeah, it was great growing up as a kid in Center Line. And then I got into high school. Um, and well, I should say middle school into high school. I had an experience of where someone had physically molested me. Um, and that's when things just flipped the script, so to speak. Then as I got older, I kind of let it go, because I'm what, eighth grade and it's whatever, it was my fault. Um, and
Well,
then I get in, go
I
ahead.
do when you say that, you're saying that's what you thought at the time, right?
Correct.
But
Correct.
you know that
Yeah.
that's not your fault.
Yeah, it felt
Okay.
like, "Oh, it's no big deal, it's normal, it's me, whatever,"
Mhm.
and
Okay.
which I know it wasn't. Now I do. And then I got into high school, started partying a lot, not as much as a lot of other people did, but I was drinking quite a bit, and then that just kinda turned into going to a party, um, getting drunk, waking up in a bed, and there's somebody naked next to me, and I had no idea who that was, didn't know what happened to me, things like that. So, that kind of, you know, taught me, hey, I'm not gonna party like that anymore. I didn't put myself in that situation anymore. But then as things progressed and I got older, I started dating somebody for quite a bit, and that person was an alcoholic, and that person ended up physically abusing. First of all, there was an instance where we had broken up and separated, and I started dating another guy. And then he showed up to my apartment, and his friend had pushed me down and broke my shoulder, and he ended up doing other things to the other guy. We did go to court over it. And as you all, I don't know if everybody's seen it, but I did a video on TikTok regarding going up to Mount Clemens Courthouse because that's where it was. And I ended up going to court on behalf of the guy, my ex. I was on his side of the table instead of the other guy's side of the table. And that was just complete fear of the unknown of what would happen or what I knew would happen if I didn't do that. And then the last of it, of my where I've had it up to here, was where we ended up in his backyard and the Mount Clemens police circled us. He had a Japanese assault rifle to my head. And the Mount Clemens police were around us. There was a helicopter up top with the light down on us, and I was able to get away from it. I was at that point, I was like, go ahead, just do it. If you're going to do it, do it. I was done. And the police were able to get me out of there, and I took off, and that was it for me.
Wow.
So, yeah, it was a lot.
Wow. Wow. Like you're like lucky to be alive, right?
Absolutely.
Like
Absolutely.
I can't imagine wow, like that's a lot to process right now. So
Yeah.
first of all, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing such just heartbreaking trauma. And and it started at a young age. So if in middle school, high school is like the hardest years, right? And
Yeah.
in growing and you're hitting puberty and hormones are flying and you're in that space of wanting to feel accepted by friends and by boys and in just all of the things. And I
Right.
think that what's really important to point out right now too is that you had a great childhood, right? You said you came like a normal childhood and yet these things can happen, no matter what kind of childhood you had or are going through. And I just think that that's really important to point out to other trauma survivors or anyone listening, that even parents, you might be giving your children an awesome childhood, but that does not keep them out of danger. Um,
100%.
so, yeah, constantly having those open conversations, I think, is so important. But so you were molested in middle school, and then you said that kind of flipped the script a little bit, and then you were violated in high school, and neither one of those, you never like spoke up at the time or went after any type of justice. So you were holding all of that in. So talk to me a little bit about how you think holding that in affected you growing up.
Well, I really think it affected me in a negative way because, every relationship that I have, I put a wall up. Sometimes I let people do whatever they wanted, and thought, hey, that's normal for me. And it wasn't. I look back now, and I knew that that's wrong. But yeah, it was very hard going through all of this, growing older, and like I said, having my own kids makes you change about how you want them to be raised and how you want them to act, and trust people and be aware of their surroundings and people around them and who they can trust. So it took me a very, very long time to trust people, especially men. Um, and I held it in for a very long time, like I said, until now, because I didn't think people would believe me. I didn't think people would support me. I felt like I would get blamed for it. So, yeah, it just that's how I felt at the time.
Wow. Well, I'm glad that you don't any longer feel that way. But I think what you were feeling, that blame, that guilt, that shame, is so common. And I think most, if not all, survivors, especially of a sexual assault manner, feel that way.
Right,
So as we talk today, I really want to make sure we talk to them specifically and how they, like, what you might recommend for them to overcome that and to see through the bullshit, right? To
right.
know that this is not on them, and that they didn't put themselves in that situation. Even like when you said you were out partying and drinking, and then you woke up next to somebody you didn't know. Like, you don't know right now. Maybe you were drugged, maybe
Yeah,
you drank too much, but that doesn't mean that gave anybody the permission to violate you. So I think it's crazy and scary how often we hear these stories, but it also makes sense to me too that your very first intimate, long, like, relationship was with a toxic man.
yes.
And that could have something to do, and please correct me if I'm wrong. I'm just talking from experience of working with a lot of trauma survivors, but typically that goes with that feeling lack of self-worth, right?
Yeah,
And
because
just
I
wanting
got
to be
made to
loved.
feel yeah, I got made to feel that way. And,
Sure.
my thought now, my voice to everyone that's going through this, don't be afraid to step up and own your truth and open your mouth. Don't be afraid. Don't let it get to that point where you're gone. Go ahead and do it.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah,
You
I
know what?
wanna talk a bit more about that relationship, because I I know that that wasn't his first time abusing you, because it doesn't
Right.
start off like that. So you kinda, like, jumped right through from, you met him and he was abusive, and then he's holding this, like, your life in his hands, basically, with you're surrounded
Yep.
by cops and helicopters. I mean, this is, like, made for TV stuff, but it is real life. And
Yeah.
that is what I wanna get across, is this stuff is real life, people. We need to wake up. This is happening to men and women and children every single day. It is happening as we're doing this podcast. And so, tell me about that relationship, how it started. They usually don't start off showing the signs of being abusive.
No, absolutely not. I met him and he was nice and he took me places and, we had fun. We'd go fishing and, he was a cool guy at the time, when he started. And then I realized he's an alcoholic and I'm like, oh, great, here we go. And then, I found out more. Then he started smoking pot. And then he was not that pot's a gateway drug, but I know all people out there get all upset over that. But, and then he was doing coke. And, it started leading to where I was getting yelled at for certain things. I was getting accused of things. Oh, you're not being faithful, this, and that. One night I was leaving the house and I was literally crawling up the steps from the basement of where he lived, and next, I thought he was passed out. Next thing I know is his hands grabbing my ankle and ripping me down the stairs. So, no punches were ever thrown, but that's enough physical abuse for me. Any type of putting your hands on somebody in that manner in any way is abuse to me. You
Oh,
know, uh,
1000%.
so little things like that would go on all the time. And it got to the point where, I just had enough. It's the verbal abuse, it's the talking down to me, um, making you feel like you're this big, things like that. It even got to the point where I'm at work and I was being harassed at work when I was at work. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Um, it really, really affected me growing up. Um, that was my end of junior, senior year of high school, and I was just like, wow. The guy was a year older than me, but I just it was a lot, he was drinking all the time, and it was like, God, I just you couldn't do anything because that's all he was doing all the time, you know?
So
So,
talk to me a little bit about how did you, yeah, especially because you're young, and
mhm,
that verbal abuse is detrimental, detrimental,
mhm,
and that's what will eat up your self-worth and your self-esteem.
100%.
And um, how did you get to the point where you said enough is enough? Um, Was it family support? Was it like, tell me how you got there? Because a lot of us don't. A lot of us will stay for so long because we feel like there's no way out. So talk to
Yeah,
us how you were able to get out.
right, and that's what it felt like. You know that as well. Um, yeah, it just was I was planning and trying many times to be, "I'm done, I'm done, I'm done." And, you're like you get that fear in you of, "If I try to leave,
Mm,
something worse is gonna happen. If I do this, he's gonna do something to somebody else," you know? So there was a lot of fear involved, absolutely. I wasn't a strong person back then, not physically, just mentally. I was drained, I was done. So when he had that gun to me, I was just like, you know what? This is it. I was able to escape that. And that was my epiphany, you know,
wow.
my rock bottom, as you would say. And that was it. I was done after that. God let me live through that, and guess what? I changed my ways after that. I got
Wow.
strong, so to speak.
So, and I want to talk about like how you got stronger, but I think what I want to clarify too, because this was huge. You touched on it very quickly, but I want to make a bigger deal of it because it
Okay.
was awesome. So Deb became a trauma survivor ambassador, and as part of that, she shared her story on her social media. And how she did that is, like she mentioned, she went to court with her ex, but she ended up dropping the charges and not going through with it because she just wanted to be done, and she was scared of what that aftermath might look like if she went through with it, which is again also very, very common for you know abuse survivors to go through. So the very first time that she goes and starts sharing her story publicly, she goes back to that freaking courthouse and she just like stands, like sits on the steps to the courthouse, and she like totally claimed her power back by sharing her story and just like, you know what? This happened to me, but you don't own me. You don't have control over me anymore. You didn't ruin my life. And that was so, so powerful.
Hi, I'm Deborah, and I'm a ambassador for trauma survivors through real life coaching. I just feel like today is a good day to start my journey as an ambassador for trauma. This is the Mount Clemens Courthouse, and this represents a moment in my life where I came here for a court date from abuse, and I ended up dropping charges. I regret that now, but back in the day, that's where I was with my train of thought and my fear. So I just want to let everybody know that there is hope out there for any trauma that you may have. And if you have any questions or would like to talk to somebody, please reach out to me. I'm more than happy to get you hooked up with somebody that you can talk to, or refer you to someone, or just to be that shoulder or that ear that you need. Anyway, I hope you all have a great day. Thank you so much for listening.
And I just wanted to bring that up because I feel like, and I've said this on a couple of the podcasts, but it's okay. Like I can't drill this enough. That sometimes we don't get that justice. We don't have the um, we just don't go through with it, and we don't go to court, and they don't always end up in jail, and we can't always depend on the justice system to give us our justice or even our closure. And you you got your justice that day. Like I could see it in your face. I could hear it in the tone of your voice. So I think it's important for other survivors to know that there are other ways.
Right.
Just because you may not have gone through with filing charges or anything like that, maybe they didn't come back and say, I'm so sorry, you didn't deserve to be treated that way. That was all on me. That's going to be so rare that an abuser would ever do that.
Right.
But we want that because we're like, why didn't they love us enough? What did I do wrong? What could have I done differently?
Right.
And we crave that conversation with our abuser.
Right.
But the fact of the matter is, even if they came and told us everything we wanted to hear, we're not going to believe them,
Right.
right?
Right.
So there are other ways to get your justice and to get your closure, and it starts with healing.
Right.
And when they see that they don't have that control over you and they see that you are happy and you're thriving in life, that is like, such a bomb for the abuser.
Yeah.
Like that's such a fail for them.
Right.
And to me, that's the best way to get revenge or justice or anything is to
Yeah.
start healing, you know?
Right.
And you
Like you said, me
did.
courthouse steps, I felt awesome after I did it.
Yeah.
And my daughter was the one videotaping. She goes, Mom, I'm so proud of you. And
Well,
I'm like, wow, it affected her, you know?
yeah.
So, um, I haven't told all my truths to everybody until now. I talked to my daughter about it um, because she is a female. Not that this only happens to females, but she is a female. And I want her to be aware of her strength as a woman.
Good for
You know,
you. Good for you. And she's in college, right? And so she's out there where there's the partying and everything's available to her.
and she
And
chooses not to because she's a totally different person than I was, but thank God. But she's so strong as a person. And I like that I can be that role model for her,
yeah,
you know? And that's why I wanted to do this is because I don't want to be a role model for everybody. I just want people to be aware that, you know, there is change out there. There is power out there for yourself. Um, just because things have happened doesn't mean that they have to continue to happen. You gotta pull yourself up. You gotta find that strength in yourself um, before it gets worse.
it's like
Don't
you have to break the cycle of the trauma.
hundred
And
percent
I think it's often that once you've gone through like one trauma, if you don't heal heal from that, and grow from that, then you get into that cycle of trauma. You get into another relationship that might be toxic
right.
and then it's abusive and then it kind of is a repetitive thing. So I want to talk to you just candidly about what can we share with our listeners about how to break that? Like when your self-esteem is low and you've been
Yeah.
beaten down, not even just physically, but verbally, or one or the other, how do you find that power? How do you start the healing process so you don't continue to go through trauma after trauma?
Right. Well, you gotta have enough cojones to say I'm done. You do. You have to love yourself enough to stop. It may not be you the one that's doing the abusing, but you have to stop abusing yourself and going through that, allowing yourself to go through it. Jamie is right 100%. As a trauma survivor, I felt like I was scared and I didn't have that power to do anything, but you have to find that power and you just have to say no. You just have to stop. You have to love, like I said, you always have to love yourself first. You
Yeah.
do. You
And
have to be strong that way.
I agree with you. I think self-love is key, but it's really difficult
It
to
is.
love yourself when you are so low in life. But that's where like, my whole silly thing about sunflowers. Like I most people know I have an obsession with sunflowers. And it's because weirdly, I could relate to a sunflower because, they start off as this little tiny seed, like just a speck, right?
Yeah.
And they're buried in dirt. And sunflowers don't need a whole lot of maintenance. They just need a little bit of water, a little bit of love. And they grow, and I don't know if you've never walked up close to a sunflower, but their stalks can be like trees.
Yeah.
They're thick and they're big, and then they get these big, you know, um, blooms. But it's that stalk that really is their foundation, right? And it can
Right.
grow from nothing. It can grow from nothing. I've seen them grow through cracks of cement from like
Right.
sunflower seeds being dropped by birds, right? And so I've always looked at that and thought, you know what? We all have that capability of growth. And I know that was a really silly story, but that's
Yeah.
why I love sunflowers so much, is because that's how I saw myself, and that I had to grow my stalk. And by
Right.
doing that with self-love. But what you really pointed out just now was it starts with a decision. And again, I've said this before, even if you feel you don't have the strength, um, just make that decision. This is not the life for me. I want out, and you can always figure it out later. You don't have
Right.
to have all the answers right then. But if you're leaving, well, I do want to do like a little bit of a disclaimer. If you're leaving an abusive relationship, I highly, highly recommend that anybody fill themselves with resources, professionals. So, like Haven, I know we talk about them a lot, but
Yeah.
they will help you with an emergency plan, because
Right.
leaving a domestic violence can escalate the violence. And
Yep.
so it's always good to have a plan, things that you won't even think about that are so necessary to help you rebuild once you're out. But it does start with that decision. And you may not love yourself at the moment, you may not have self-worth, but you'll never get it in the same environment that took it from you.
Right. There's
So,
still a little speck of there's a little speck of you somewhere that you feel is worth getting that help. I did counseling with I did a Zoom counseling with somebody that's helped me immensely. I literally talked with a priest before. I was reaching out to resources that I didn't think were going to help, but they did. Just takes a little bit of you to go, oh my God, I got to get out of this. I
yeah,
got to self to get out of this relationship because
yeah.
it's not for you or the other person. It's not. It's going to end up badly.
And if you're thinking about it, like even tuning into like podcasts like this, find podcasts that have stories that are relatable, that are full of um resources or tips and tricks of things that will help you rebuild yourself after trauma. And that will start to give you that motivation and that crave
Yeah.
of a better life. And once you start craving that, you know, usually nothing will stop you to getting that. And just everyone deserves that. And
Yeah.
I to really want to help people like you that go through this trauma, not wait decades before they
Right.
start sharing their story. Um, so let's talk about that a little bit. About, I know you said that eh, initially you stayed quiet because you thought maybe people would blame you and things like that. But why do you feel survivors hold their story in so much?
I think for me, I feel like it was my fault that I did something wrong to go through what I did. And I didn't feel like at the time, like when I was in middle school, when the molestation happened, um, that there was going to be people in my corner. So it was really, really hard for me. I kept it in forever. It felt like, you know, um, but and it's always been in the back of my mind. It's always been in me to where I knew that that happened. And I needed to do something about it for me, and I didn't. So it was just really hard. I felt like less of a person. I don't know. I just, the trust too. My walls went up like all the
Yeah.
time, all the time.
Yeah. I mean, and that's understandable in feeling like it was your fault,
Hmm.
feeling like you had some kind of control over that
Right.
happening to you. All of those things, embarrassment, shame, all of those things do keep us quiet. But living with that for decades can really negatively affect you mentally and emotionally. And I've also found, working with trauma survivors is especially starting this ambassador program where the ambassadors are talking out loud and they're healing out loud. When they started to, they were getting some like y- people that maybe they haven't even had anything to do with come out and start trying to shame them into
Yeah.
silence. They're trying to guilt them into silence. And working with Haven, I have found out that that often happens.
It
And
does.
so for me, I just, I'm a big believer in not making yourself small to make somebody else comfortable.
Right.
And anytime there's abuse of any sort, it is not your fault. It is not your fault. It is not
Right.
your fault. And I just feel I want to save survivors from punishing themselves, like you had said. We literally turn into our own worst abusers. And,
Mm.
you know, we start to emotionally and verbally abuse ourselves. And by telling ourselves it's our fault, by telling ourselves, well, if you weren't drinking, this would have never happened. If, we start telling ourselves all kinds of really terrible, terrible things.
Right.
And, and that's sad because we can't escape who we are, right? But we can change our thought process and we can change our mindset. And I think that's a really great place to start is even if you say, you know what, I don't love myself today. I don't know how to love myself, but I want to find out how because I want to learn to love myself. And
Right.
that's a great place to start. It's
Right.
just deciding that you want to love yourself. And but it's
I
even hard in society today to love yourself because people think you're cocky or overconfident or something. If you get on and and show signs of loving yourself or choosing yourself first by like, no, I'm not going to go to the birthday party. I'm really sorry. I just
right.
really need a self-care day. It's like, wow, putting
Yeah.
yourself first is really hard in today's world. So
Yeah.
so, how did you, after going through so much trauma, and I always say, like that young age, poof, that that can do some long term damage when it starts at such a young age. How did you break the cycle? Because like now, tell me, like I know, but I want you to tell our Thrive tribe that's listening to you about your great life now. You're happily married. You have successful children. Like you do all the things. You're in this Jeep group. You go on vacations. Um, you're a very strong person. You have boundaries now. How did you get there?
Well, I know it took me decades,
Mm,
like you said, unfortunately. Um, but one of the things, and I'm not just saying this to just, oh, real life coaching is the best, which it is, but
yep,
meeting you through the Jeep Club, that really, it took me a minute to trust again.
sure.
Um, but when we did the memorial ride, my first memorial ride with you, that was when I realized I could trust.
Mm,
Honest to God.
wow.
That really was powerful for me that day. Um, because when we did that, it allowed people to open up about their lives that they wouldn't normally do or feel comfortable doing. And that pretty much was my time. It took forever to do it, it felt like. But that's when I started deciding, honestly, Jamie, that I wanted to do something for myself to get this all out and push it away. And it's done. I'm done,
Right.
you know?
Right.
Um, and I did my real life coaching with you, with a group of people. And that was just, oh my gosh, amazing. Um, because it made me feel like I wasn't the only one out there. You feel like you're the only one going through things that you go through sometimes, the traumas that you go through, and you're not, you know? So it really, really enlightened me to open my mouth and speak my truth. There's people out there that would prefer me not to, but you know what? I said, speak your piece. I will allow you to speak what you feel about what I'm doing. And then I didn't comment on it. This is my truth. I'm not going to go backward. I'm going forward. And other people just have to feel like they have to learn how to deal with what I'm talking about and what I've been through. And, I'm not doing this for attention. I'm not doing it for, oh, feel sorry for Deborah, not at all. This is because there are so many other people going through these traumas in their life, the sexual abuse, the physical abuse, the mental abuse, um, grief, losing someone so close to you like you did,
Like you
is,
did, like you
yeah,
did.
it's a lot for one
Mhm.
person to handle, and if you just let that bottle up in you, it's gonna destroy you.
Yeah.
So I really, really wanted to speak my truth, and just get out there. And, if my story helps one person, just one person to say, oh my God, she went through the same thing that I went through, or, I really feel afraid, if that helps somebody to come out and own their truth and just to stop the cycle, that's all I want.
Yeah, I love that, Deb. And here's the thing, it's not if it's going to change someone's life, it is. It is going to change someone's life. And just like you said, sitting in that, we were in a teepee on that on that memorial ride,
Yeah,
and we were sharing our stories. And you just, like you pretty much just said, because other women were sharing their stories, that's when you decided, I'm going to open my mouth. So it happens. That's exactly what I'm talking about. So
I yes,
yeah, it was just like, and we may never know. We may never know who watches this podcast.
right,
And we may never know who took something from this and said, you know what? I'm going to start owning my truth, and I'm going to start opening my mouth, and not to play victim, but
right,
because I want to heal. And by healing, I'm going to take control of my life again. And,
absolutely,
and I'm sorry that there's people that were maybe put off or disappointed when you shared your story. I think that change scares everybody.
it
And
does.
you're changing, and that could potentially like freak people out a little bit. Like, who
Yeah,
is this new Deborah? Like, what is she doing?
yeah,
How is this going to affect me? And sometimes I think it's great that you let them share their concern, but
uh-huh,
yet you can respect it, but you don't have to let their opinion control what you do going forward. I think it's really
absolutely,
important to acknowledge, like, hey, yeah, I understand that that might be upsetting for you. Um, and I hope that you can find ways to work that out, because I hate to have this come between us. But for me and in my life, this is what's really important to me. And so this is
oh,
what I'm going to do going forward. So we can validate people's feelings. And I wanted to just kind of share that for other trauma survivors that are also going through, being either shamed into being quiet or guilted, or like, why are you doing this? This makes us look bad, or, just whatever they got to say. I've heard it all. Um, we can acknowledge and validate it, but it doesn't have to change what we feel is best for us.
right,
And I am just so freaking proud of you for getting to where you're at today, and in sharing your story, because like you said, it was decades that you held this in. And I think just you sitting on the courtroom steps, like the courthouse steps, was just such a significant power move. Like, what I mean? It was just
yeah,
a freaking power move. I loved it. And I think it's important too that people realize that you nor any other trauma survivor ambassador, specifically in this program that I'm working with, none of us are doing it for attention. None of us are
right,
doing it to be a victim. We were a victim. That's what we're trying to get the hell away from. We don't want to be a victim anymore. So no, we're sharing this out of um, out of power and just saying, "Look at, I can talk about it now, and because it doesn't weigh on me like it did. It doesn't control me and it doesn't scare me like it
Right.
did."
Right.
That's super powerful. So, being in the ambassador program, I know you said you wanted to help change people's lives. What's
Yes.
how do you think I guess you tell me, like, what this program you think it can do to change people's lives.
100%. I think that this program it's in its infancy, so to speak, but it's getting a lot, I'm watching the podcast that you're doing with other trauma survivor ambassadors, and it's getting out there, Jamie. It's just, I always say social media can be a hindrance or it can be a blessing,
Right.
Um, that's why, a lot of people are afraid to go out there and show their faces and, you know, speak their truth and stuff. I think it's helping so much. I think it's going to, because we have so many stories that are relatable, and everybody is, it seems like everybody's shamed, like you said, into not speaking up and talking about what they're going through and asking for that help. That is the first step, is saying, you know what, I'm done. I need some help. And I think it will help others to look for that help. Even if it's texting me and going, "Hey Deb, do you have that number to Haven? Hey Jamie, who can I call for this?" It doesn't matter how you get it, just get it, you know. Um, it's gonna be great. I think it's gonna be amazing. I think so many people are gonna come out more and more, and I bet you're gonna have more podcasts to do, which is amazing. It's sad, yeah, because we all went through it, but guess what? We're through that part. We jumped that hoop. And we're speaking our truth and helping others. So I'm praying that you get more people,
Yeah. I
more.
think so. I am praying too, because I think that well, like you just said, anyone that's going through trauma or is trying to heal from trauma that watches this, first of all, it's going to make them feel less alone, right?
Right,
But then we're also showing 'em that it is possible. There is hope, because I know that when you're going through it, anybody could tell you, "Well, you just got to learn to love yourself, and you're worth it, and you're all this," and they can say all those things, and you're just, like, it's
right,
so far fetched to think that when you're in the midst of trauma, that your life is going to be anything other than your trauma. It is
right.
really hard to believe that. And I
It is.
feel like that's our power move, is to show the other side of trauma. And
Right,
that, yes, we have gone through it. We have all been in those dark spaces for um, multiple different traumas, but
right.
also um, some are like decades of it. But there is hope on the other side of that.
Yes.
There is, and that's, I think, gonna be an incredible tool, and it might not even be one specific thing that any of us say, but it's the fact that there is survivor after survivor after survivor going, "You know what? I own my own business. I'm
Right.
happily married. I'm in a very healthy relationship. I, all the things. You've got a vacation spot that you love to go to. You call it your paradise. You get to go do
Mhm.
all of those things, and you get to enjoy those things, without fear, without.
And can I just add something to that real quick? I know we're
Sure.
running out of time here, but um, I also, a lot of people are afraid to speak up to their spouses or significant others and tell them about their past trauma.
Wow.
I have done that with my husband this past few years, and we talk about it. And I thank God for that, because he's amazing. He supports me. He lets me ramble when I need to ramble, like I'm doing now. But he's so supportive of it, and you know, he says, speak your truth, do what you need to do to help others and to heal yourself, most importantly. He wants me to be happy and be healthy in myself. So I think it's great that I have that.
I love that. And thank you for sharing that because I think, I just want to bring this up that you are recently like doing this and telling your truth out loud and stuff like that. But you've talked about it started when you became part of a community of women for the Jeep Babes group. But it doesn't have to be a Jeep group, but you put yourself into a community with women. And you found, relationships in that, and then
Hmm.
opening up to your husband and him being supportive. I love that. Um, and that that's helped you be able to open up out loud, right?
Right,
And for the healing. So I think that's a really good key takeaway is finding the right people to support you.
right.
And it could be like the last podcast I had on was an MMA fighter and she's
Yep,
just a badass and that's what's helped her. And there's a lot of healing in getting into different programs like that, whether it be church or dance. You're never too old to join dance,
right,
anything like that. Doing stuff like that, I think could be an incredible escape for you mentally to find a space that will help your healing and to start to
right.
heal. But all right.
For
I
sure.
always ask, do you have anything last minute that you would like to get out to the Thrive Tribe before we close?
I think we need to keep doing what we're doing. Um, Please, more people open up. Get a hold of Jamie, get a hold of me, get a hold of Nicole, get a hold of everybody that is involved. Um, Speak your truth, even if it's just us. We're here for you. Don't be shamed into telling your truth. And, we're here for you and we love you. So,
Thank you. I love that. I couldn't have said that any better to myself. So that sounded like the perfect closing to me. But thank you, Thrive Tribe, for joining us for yet another powerful episode. I want to thank Deb from the bottom of my heart for being so brave to share the story and the things that helped her heal and get her to where she's at today. So, if you yourself are a trauma survivor or know anyone that may be, or just want to help, please be sure to subscribe and like, and maybe put a comment on this video on maybe what your takeaway was from this because like Deb said, this whole program is at the very beginning stages and I want to see it grow because the bigger it gets, the more people we're going to be able to reach and help. So help us do that by sharing these podcasts and subscribing. Until next time, see you later.